Welcome, welcome, welcome. This is Edna White, and I am your host of Keeping It Real on Purpose. And today we have our esteemed guest who has written a book. He's an author. And he also founded, now I got to get this word right, Alchemy Partners, a life science learning and performance company that was ranked by Inc. 5000 in 2019 and 2020 before achieving acquisition in 2020 by Eversana. I thought that was pretty cool. And he currently is the founder of Unlimited Heart Health and Wellness. He collaborates with other organizations of healthcare and professionals, accelerating cardiac innovations. Now, he has a whole host of other accolades, but I know through his story that I've read, he hopes to empower others to find strength and resilience in the face of health challenges while continuing to innovate and advocate for better patient care solutions. Welcome to the show, Jim Kaveney. Am I saying it right?
Kaveney.
Kaveney.
Yeah,
Okay, Kaveney. I
it's
just
all
put the New York spin on it.
no. That's fine. It's funny. When I was in Ireland this past spring, they actually told me I was pronouncing it the wrong way.
Oh,
So
okay. That is funny. Well, I thank you for helping me to pronounce it the right way.
all good.
So tell us what got you started. Well, I want to talk about the book first, and you can share your bio or whatever you want to share. But I really want to talk about the book because I have something I want you to answer for me.
Well, let's start there then.
Okay.
How do you want me to
Okay,
tell you
so
about the book?
I wanted to talk about I really like your story because one of the things I really talk about in my practice and in my life is pain to purpose. And of course, keeping it real on purpose, right? Pain to purpose. I can't tell you how my life has changed from my pain. I had an accident, and how my life has changed, and my original self kind of came back. You know, but I want to talk about the chapter that really caught my eye because I wanted to know what this really meant. Because I know you're from another state, so it's probably one of those state words. So it's called Way Enough, and it's chapter I think chapter three,
Chapter
Way
three.
Enough. So tell us
Yeah.
about this chapter in general, and I want to know about why you named it Way Enough.
Yeah. So way enough is actually it's a rowing term. And
Okay,
I was a rower in college, and so there's a lot of there's tons of commands around
gotcha.
rowing, and way enough is something where when we're out rowing and we have a coxswain,
Oh,
or
okay.
short for coxswain, the person that sits in the front of the boat
Mm-hmm.
and screams commands to us. And so if they want to take control of the boat and they want us to completely stop, the command is way enough. Uh,
Oh, okay.
you
Okay.
just you
Got
stop.
it.
And
Got
then
it.
the converse of that is let it run. And so if you're
Oh,
out rowing and rowing and rowing and somebody says let it run, you stop rowing, but the boat completely glides, and so you just let the boat ride out. But
okay.
with way enough, you are actually coming to complete stop. You're checking your oars into the water, and you're stopping completely.
Gotcha. Okay. Wow, that's a big one. Stopping completely. I
Yeah.
like that. So, in this story, tell us about the chapter three.
Yeah, so the importance of chapter three really was it's about me when I was going through college and rowing. And this is where I got exposed to, and this is back in the 90s, right? So I'm going to date myself a
Uh-huh.
little bit.
Okay.
So back in the 90s, where mindset training, performance coaches,
Right.
they didn't exist.
Right.
Like we didn't have any of that, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
think everybody had the whole, if it doesn't work, rub some dirt in it and you'll figure it out, and we'll go from there.
And keep it moving.
And keep it moving. And as we were joking before the podcast, keeping it real, right? Just
Yes, keeping it
keep doing your
real.
thing.
As real as possible. Yeah.
And
Exactly.
so we're out there and we're practicing on the water. And what was challenging is I was new to rowing, so I was a freshman at the time, and I had never touched I was never in a rowing boat before. And the
Hmm.
three gentlemen that I was rowing with, one was from the Czech Republic, and the other two had rowed in high school,
Okay.
and we just could not get in sync. We were completely out of control, and our coxswain at the time, Annie, she was like, I'm not going to deal with this.
Right.
And so she started giving us some specific commands to figure out how we could row together and work together. And it was all about finding trust in each other.
Hmm.
And so if you can imagine, I don't know if you, and I would highly recommend going out and watching the movie Boys in the Boat. It
Okay.
it was just it was released by at last Christmas, actually, by George Clooney. He was the director, and it gives you a good
Okay.
impression of what rowing is all about. But anyway, so we were out rowing, and we were not rowing in sync. And she said, as we were going full rowing, she's like, "Close your eyes and trust that ultimately something is going to settle in." And we closed our eyes and we started rowing, and next thing we were in sync and we were crushing it. And so it took us a little while to come over that adversity and challenge of working together. But once we did, then we went on and we won multiple, not championships, but every race on the weekends, we were
Wow, that's
always winning.
great.
And it was just really about, and I would align this with faith, right?
Right.
Because I know you're a Christian, I'm a Christian. It's just kind of letting it go.
Hmm.
Just let it go and trust the process. And so
Right.
that's in
Okay.
essence what she did. And that was my first exposure to kind of a mindset training of just really relaxing the body and the mind and letting it go, and trying to figure out, like, all right, we got a point A to B to get to. Just trust me, I'm going to lead you where that's going to go. And so that was my first exposure to it. And the other challenge that came out of that, my experience, was then I started having some challenges with my heart. And
Oh
so
boy.
it popped up in my rowing, and I didn't think anything of it, because again, I was a young kid. I thought to myself jokingly, I probably had a few too many beers the night before practice, and maybe I was dehydrated. I didn't think anything of it, and I just ignored it. But then about almost 20 years later, it came back to haunt me, and that ultimately led to my full diagnosis of atrial fibrillation when I was 38 years
Wow.
old.
Okay.
So that's
Wow.
that's the that's the emphasis of Way Enough, was really kind of the beginning of my understanding of what mindset training is, and then how I could grow from that and utilize that moving forward in my life.
Okay. Great. That's great. And I know I read your book, and it's Unlimited Heart. And I just knew I love, I'm gonna tell you, whoever did the graphics had me on in. It went with everything. It
Yeah,
went with every chapter, just so you know. I'm saying
yeah,
that today. But
thank you.
I loved it. And I made notes all over. Um Sometimes we have different experiences, but no, we have different, whatever it is. So I had a car accident, you had a heart issue,
Yeah,
and it just seems like we went through the same things. Like we
yeah,
experienced it was the learning patterns that we learned. It was super. It was great. I was like, oh my gosh, here I am right here.
yeah, yeah.
so so tell me, what was one of the most learning experiences out of having that heart issue and learning about it.
Honestly, the biggest thing for me was understanding and embracing my mortality.
Ooh,
Um,
that's good.
because the biggest thing for me, and I don't know why I felt this way,
Hmm.
for all of these years, it didn't matter what was happening, all that messy stuff that happened between
Right,
college and by the time I was diagnosed, I
right.
thought I was invincible. Truly. I'm like, I'm invincible. I feel great. Like I'm taking on the world, like nothing's going to beat me down. And then all of a sudden this pops up and it's like, oh, this is my heart. Like this is an issue. And then I just really started to realize, like, oh my gosh, I'm 38 years old. I'm like, this could be really bad if I don't take care of it. And so I embraced my mortality, which then in turn helped me to become more grateful for what I
Oh,
have in the day, right?
that's a really good. That's a really good word.
Yeah. And so
Grateful.
that was
Yes.
and that was that was the biggest challenge for me, was and actually learning was, again, right, everybody jokes, well, that's why they call today the present, because it's a gift, right?
Yes.
And but Ed, and I will tell you, I strive now to live that way, because
Yep.
I've dealt with a significant amount of anxiety when I was a teenager,
Hmm. Hmm.
and I overcame that in some ways. And then I started realizing, like, my God, if like I only just live for today and not worry about tomorrow,
It's
then
an
I'm
excellent feeling.
I'm I feel free, right? And
Yes, you're
and
not under any pressure. And it takes a while to learn that. You got to get in the habit of strategically doing it. It's got to be okay. I'm going to do this. You can't think that you're going to do it like automatically because your mind is not going to let you do it, right?
No,
But you
no.
have to intentionally focus on the moment. Focus on the moment. You know, did you have an experience that besides that the bigger experience or a task that taught you how to be in the moment?
Well, so again, I'll go back to the whole thing. Like there was a huge gap
Right.
between college and when I was diagnosed,
Right. Okay.
and so I was diagnosed with atrial fibrillation at the same time I was launching my business, Alchemy Partners. So that was all
Right.
happening in 2012,
Okay.
and so it was funny, and I had a business partner at the time. He left me about 9 months into it, so I was left all by myself to kind of reboot the company and do my thing,
Right.
which I was okay with, but I was struggling. And another friend of mine calls me up and he's like, "You haven't read the book yet." I said, "Well, what's the book?" And he's like, "It's Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill."
Yeah.
And
I
and I'm
yes.
and I'm like,
Love the
"Okay."
book.
So I literally, and as you read it in the book, and I'm not ashamed to say this. Now, you and I obviously are not in the same space. So I'm 6'6",
Uh-huh.
and so I was traveling from New Jersey up to New Hampshire, where I live. And he said, "Get the book." And I came home. It was a summer night. My wife was out with my two boys, and
Mm-hmm.
I was home all alone. And so I went to the local grocery store. I grabbed a 6 pack of Budweiser,
Okay.
and I had the book on iBooks, and I made
Right.
myself a bubble bath, lit some candles, and I just devoured the book. And I woke up literally. I went to bed thinking what Napoleon Hill was saying, and I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
I am all in. Like this is it.
I
Let's
was on
go."
fire. Yeah, I was on fire.
Yeah, and I'm like, "Let's go." And then I said, "Oh, wait a minute. There might actually be something to this science."
Right.
And then that's when I started getting introduced to more and more people that were talking about how do you really start to channel and strengthen your mind so that you can think
Mm-hmm.
and practice in the right way. And
Right.
and I didn't know there was a science behind it.
Yeah.
And then I learned, like, holy cow,
Yeah.
there is so much science behind this.
My gosh.
And
Yeah.
that's what's inspired me.
That's good. That's really good. That's really good because I'm gonna tell you, I have to every now and again when I get off track, I jump to that book, Think and Grow Rich. I jump back to it because it gets me back in line and it puts me on fire. And just all of his books in general are just they can be read easily, but they are deep, very deep, and you have to sit down and like dissect. Okay, I got to do this, I got to do that, and it's so good. It's just so good. But every one of his books goes back to Think
Yeah,
and Grow Rich, which is amazing.
it is.
I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Every book I ever read goes back to those principles, no matter what happens.
Yep.
Back to the principles.
Yeah.
So when you were going through this, we're talking about principles. What are some of the principles that you, when developing your company, did you use?
Yeah, so again, for me, right, let's go back to the first principle was embracing
Yes.
my mortality, right? So I
Yes.
I did that, and so every single day I knew I needed to do something, right?
Right.
And
Okay.
and the big driver, right, as we said with Napoleon Hill, it's like you have to have that white hot burning
Yeah.
desire to succeed. And so at this time, my wife wasn't working. I had two small
Mhm.
boys and I had a cardiac issue. So I'm like, I've got to provide for them. Like, because I'm not
Mhm.
turning back. I'm not going to go back to work for
Right.
somebody. I'm building a business.
Right.
And so for me, it was that I established what the non-negotiables were.
Right.
So I tried to remove the distractions from my day. And that would
Mhm.
have been, I'm not a huge social media guy, but I wasn't, but it was what would keep me away from making my sales calls every single day, sending
Right.
out 10 emails a day, trying to make 10 phone calls. Like,
Right.
because I knew, like, as I did that, all of that would add up, and
Mhm.
eventually the dam would break and business would start coming in.
Right.
And so it's really establishing those non-negotiables of what is it going to be that I have to do every single day.
Right.
And so that was one thing. But then also, it was really kind of just like, what's my big goal, right? So I gave myself an aspiration of, like, I want to make $1.5 million in 5 years. That was my goal. I'm like, I
Right.
just want to make a
Okay.
$1.5 million.
Mhm.
And so I kept striving for that every single day.
Okay.
But the other aspect, which I think is even more important, is what I did for myself at night. So when I went to bed, I
Mhm.
didn't sit there and say, what didn't I get done? I sat there and said, what did I get done today? And I would forgive myself for what I didn't do. because I knew I needed to rest easy. Because as we were talking about earlier today, is like enjoy the present. Tomorrow's going to have enough problems, so it'll take care of itself. So I was going to rest my head easily, wake up the next morning, and go back at it again. And so the ability to say I need to establish a daily goal, my non-negotiables, and then forgive myself at night if something goes awry, because invariably life happens. It's
Yeah,
messy,
it's
and
good.
we don't always get to succeed every single day, but it's the
That's good.
additive and the cumulative.
I like that. Forgive yourself at night. When you once you debrief, you forgive yourself at night. I like that. That's great.
Yeah.
Great addition to the day. I like that. I like that. So, what did you hope for your book to do once it came out, and what did you want it to do?
Yeah. So great question. So I've learned a lot, right? So and
Uh-huh.
you've obviously written multiple books, and so you understand this journey. And I was new to it. So uh, somebody once said to me, like, don't intend on making any money
Right.
on
Yeah,
writing a
yeah. They tell
book.
you
So
that. Yeah.
I'm like, all right. So I said to my wife, I'm like, hey, I'm going to write this thing. I'm really excited about it, but it's not going to make any money. She's like, that's fine. So, but the whole purpose around it is to one, raise awareness
Okay.
around atrial fibrillation and the
Hmm.
challenges with it.
Okay.
But more important with it is it's the balance between the heart and the mind. And so for me, when my heart was weak with my disease, my mind was strong. And when my mind was weak because of negative thoughts or whatever it was, my heart was always strong. But when the two of them come together and they're clicking, right? Like you said, when you reach it, you're on fire, right? You feel that energy. So my whole idea of writing this book was to say, not like I'm some business genius, because no, I'm not, right? Because as you mentioned earlier, Alchemy Partners did exceptionally well. We were ranked in a lot of Inc. magazine and everything else.
Yeah.
And so people were coming to me saying, you are, and these were their words, you're a business genius, write a book. I'm like, no, like I'm not, because there's millions of other small
Yeah.
businesses that are fighting this fight every single day. And my story is no different from theirs.
Hmm.
But then I finally met somebody after the third year of these people calling me, and she's now a friend of mine, and she worked for the publisher at the time. She said, Jim, do not write a book until you find a purpose. And so
Yeah.
then I figured out what my purpose was, and I said, I need to share my story, not necessarily about the entrepreneur side. I think that's important, but it's also being an entrepreneur, but also having a chronic health disease at the same
Yeah.
time. And how can you take that and overcome
Yeah.
some challenges?
Hmm.
But more importantly, it was all right. I just turned 50 last April, so my friends joked with me. They're like, "All right, you're on the back nine of your life. Like, what good are you gonna do now?" And so my whole thought is like, "All right, I've been through a lot of crap, and
Hmm.
I'm an educated individual because we worked in the life sciences space, and I know a lot about healthcare and what's the right things to do. But I was still quite ignorant about the disease and how I could manage it.
Right.
So I
Okay.
said, how do I go out now, write the story, share my story about atrial fibrillation, entrepreneurship, and everything else, and
Hmm.
help other people that are struggling?
Right.
Because they might not be as educated in this space as me. So let me share my story so that they can say, I know what this guy's talking about. I've been through
Right.
this. I can do this too.
Right. And that's what a book does. It's like it's an ah and an aha at the same
Yes,
time. Yeah, it's ah
100%.
and an aha. So it really does awaken that. I know that so many. We have heart foundations. I was like, oh, this book could be in the heart foundation. Reader the log that they have. Good. This is good to read. And I would. It's so encouraging to you know have someone on that takes what happens to them and then converts it so that other people in that same space, that
Yeah.
same experience can say you can do this. Because so many people give up. And you
Yeah.
didn't. You didn't. You made something out of this. So it's really important for the audience to know. Is there something in the book that you didn't know until you wrote the book?
Well, I would say it was a cathartic experience.
Okay.
Um,
Okay.
and so for me, and this is so I'm the youngest of nine. We were
Okay.
raised we're raised Irish Catholic, and sometimes
Okay.
there's a lot of comedians that talk about the Irish Catholic and the Irish Catholic guilt, right? Like
Uh-huh.
we often sometimes push our pain and stuff
Yeah.
in way deep down into the soul, and it doesn't come out. And I think for the most part, I was doing that until I started writing the story.
Oh, that's good.
And I found myself alone because I would get up at
Hmm.
5 o'clock in the morning, do my 1,500 to 2,000 words a day, and I would just be sitting there sobbing. And
Wow.
but it was okay. But I'm like, wow, this feels good. Like, this feels good. There's stories in there about, dealing with both my mother and my father and their dementia, and
Wow.
losing my parents 3 4 years before they passed away because they were no longer the same people.
Wow. Wow. That's an experience all by itself. That's a real
Yeah, right.
experience.
And so that felt really good for me to get it out on the page. And so that was, I wasn't expecting that. I just figured I'd get on there, write the facts, and then my
Yeah.
editor would help me out, tweak the story a little bit, and we'd be done. But
Hmm.
that's one thing I learned was it was a blessing that it was so cathartic for me to write it.
That's great. That's great. It's like journaling. I swear it is.
It
No
is,
matter
and
what book I write, it's like journaling, you know?
I'm not good. I honestly, I'm not a good journaler. I don't do that on a daily basis, but I
Okay.
put it all in the recesses of my mind. And this, as you read it, here's
Yeah.
almost 40 40 to 50 years of my life. It all came out. And it
Uh-huh.
was the funny thing too about it was, it's obviously 250 pages, 65,000 words. But I had almost 100,000 words written, and my editor cut out 35,000. I'm like, how do you know those 35,000 aren't the most important book? And she's like, don't worry about
Right.
it.
I know. It's
You're
just
good. You're
that
good. Trust
experience
me. I'm like,
alone.
oh, that was so hard. But no, it turned out great.
That's good. You know, it seems like we had that same experience because I know first time I ever worked with an editor, not an editor, but a publisher. And, when you write a lot, they want to take things out. So, like, how do you know if that's a good part? They do know.
Yeah,
They know. Yeah,
they
they
do.
know.
They
Because
do.
they know what your goal is for the book. Each book has its own personality and it goes where it needs to go. But yeah, it's our baby. It's part of our lives. So it's so important. But I think you and the editor got it down right in this one.
Thank you. Yeah, she was a wonderful contributor all along. Great friend. So it was a fun journey. 2 year. I mean, it's almost a 2 year journey. So it
Yeah,
takes a long
project.
time.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. So, Jim, tell me how, like one step, or tell the audience one step on how to transform their pain into purpose.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be this grandiose, right?
Right.
So my wife always tells me you always have to go big. So I'm like, that's just me. But for me, like what I'm doing, I'll quickly mention it. So this was a book to business strategy for me. And it's like, let
Okay.
me write the book, share the story.
Okay.
As a friend of mine told me, you're not an authority until you're an author. And so, okay, I'm like, okay, I like that. So I wrote the story. And so now we've launched Unlimited Heart Health and Wellness, which is a health and wellness company.
Right.
And this is me helping patients with atrial fibrillation, right? So
Okay.
that's me turning my pain into a purpose. Now,
Right.
people don't have to be that grandiose, right?
Right.
They just don't. They can go do something simple, right?
Hmm.
But I think before that, they have to reconcile with themselves
Uh
whether or
huh.
not they feel like, do I want to do something with my pain, and
Okay.
how am I going to perceive this pain, right? So there can be the woe is me crowd, or
Okay.
there can be there's the whoa, I've got something happen to me, I can do something different, I can do something positive.
Okay.
And I've lived because I've lived a lot of years, and I've met a lot of people, and there's a lot of woe is me, like the world is
Hmm.
crushing down on me, I can't do anything beyond my whatever illness or whatever's happening to me. I'm like, but no, but you can reframe the way you look at yourself, and
Right.
there's something good in there. And so, and it's not, and I want to clarify too, this is not talking about being toxic positivity. you know there's a concept that I've borrowed from somebody. It's called embracing the suck, right?
Okay.
And embracing the suck is like, okay, this sucks, like, oh my gosh, I've got a cardiac issue, or I've got something else that went on, or I broke my leg, or I've got diabetes. Like, yes, this sucks. Like, don't
Yeah.
ignore that, like, but embrace it and say, all right, I've got this bad thing that's happening to me, now what?
Right.
And you can wallow in yourself and have a miserable existence, or you can say, okay, I'm going to do the right things for myself and be around the people that I love, and that could be just your local community. So this is volunteering at church, or I'm a board member at the Boys and Girls Club. I love giving back to the community. So there's other ways in which you can share your stories and your pain and flip it around so it's something positive, because
Hmm.
guess what? If it's you experiencing it,
Right.
there's millions of other people doing the same thing. And so if you can help somebody that way, go for it. But you have to, one of the next steps in once you embrace all these things is you just have to get moving.
Yeah.
And I like, and this was a Napoleon Hill quote, and it's like,
Okay.
what is one thing you can do today
Yep.
that would improve your
Proof
life
to life
or the
to.
life of somebody else?
Yep. Yep.
And
Yep.
if you can send that to
That's
yourself in
good.
an email or a text message,
Hmm.
then you've started the process. You're
Yeah.
moving, and just figure out just that one thing that you could do that could change somebody's life or your own life.
Absolutely. Oh, that's good. I like that. I like that one. Okay, so tell us how we can get involved with, participating in Unlimited Heart and us also getting the book.
Yeah, no, so great. So the book is available. So you can go on to unlimitedheartbook.com, and you can see
Okay.
all sorts of activity that's going around the book. It's available on Amazon, all the other major book retailers, Barnes and Noble, et cetera, all for order. So thank you to your audience for that. And then getting involved with, just kind of spreading the word. The
Right.
key thing around, I want to get out to this around atrial fibrillation is right now it's the number one arrhythmia in the world.
Oh wow.
In the United States, there's 6 million patients that have it, but in just
Hmm.
5 short years, we're going to be up to 12 million patients that will have. It's a complete doubling of the amount of patients that have atrial fibrillation, and it's debilitating, but it can be reversed and it also can be prevented. So that's what we want to do. And the whole point of Unlimited Heart Health and Wellness is we're collaborating with other healthcare professionals
Okay.
that are doing the same things, where we are focusing on, um, you know, um, lifestyle modification of the
Okay.
disease factors, right? So, for instance, a lot of the challenges that we have in the United States is around obesity and
Right.
diabetes and
Hmm.
hypertension.
Hmm.
Atrial fibrillation is all correlated with all of that. And
Okay.
so, if we start to take into consideration going out, working out, choosing the right foods to eat, we can actually preclude atrial fibrillation from starting, but we can also have a better impact on people being able to manage it if they
Okay.
just take a look at their lifestyle and make some simple changes. That's all. We're not telling them to be completely boring, but enjoy life to a certain extent, but cut it back a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. That is awesome. Well, we thank you because I was going to ask you about who was involved and who were those contributors, but you let one out, so I'm good. I'm glad. I'm glad about that.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for being here. This has
Thank
really
you.
been eye opening, and I hope the audience will take some of your advice and your steps and your understanding and your experience to heart.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Edna, for your time, and I appreciate what you're
You're
doing because you're on a
welcome.
good mission as well.
You're welcome. And this is Edna White, your esteemed host, with my esteemed guest of The Unlimited Heart, how to transform your pain into purpose. Saying goodbye for now.
Take care.